If you've had heartburn more than twice this week, one of these 5 foods is the reason, and there's a good chance you ate it in the last 24 hours. Your doctor probably called it just getting older. That's not what's actually happening. There's a small ring of muscle where your food pipe meets your stomach valve. One job: slam shut after food passes through and keep acid locked below it. After 50, that valve starts losing its grip, the same way every other muscle in your body does. And 5 everyday foods are prying it open faster than they should. 2 of them, you've been told for years, are good for you. This isn't about willpower, and it isn't about eating clean. It's about one specific muscle and what 5 specific foods do to it every single time you eat them. I'm Lina. I spend my time digging into the research on digestive health, and I'm about to show you exactly which foods are working against that valve and why. We're counting down from 5 to 1. Number 1 is the food almost nobody wants to hear is a problem, and it isn't the one you'd guess. Food number 5, carbonated drinks, soda, sparkling water, seltzer, even the plain, sugar-free, it's basically just water kind that gets treated like a safe substitute. The mechanism here is more mechanical than most people expect, which is part of why it's so easy to overlook. Carbonation fills the stomach with gas. As that gas expands, it stretches the stomach wall and pushes upward, directly into the valve sitting above it. Push hard enough, from below, often enough, and the valve gets forced open. Not because it relaxed on its own, but because it was overwhelmed by pressure it was never built to resist. That's why reflux so often shows up within minutes of a carbonated drink, especially when it's paired with a meal, when the stomach is already fuller than usual. It isn't a coincidence, and it isn't in your head. It's basic physics playing out inside your digestive system. Beer and champagne carry a double version of this problem, since the carbonation and the alcohol both work against the same valve at the same time. Diet versions don't get a pass here either. In this particular case, the sugar isn't the problem, the bubbles are. If your reflux consistently seems to hit hardest at dinner, look at what's sitting in the glass next to the plate before you look anywhere else on the table. Try one dinner with sparkling water and another with still water a few nights apart, and compare how you feel a couple of hours later. Once you're paying attention, the difference tends to be obvious. A lot of people switch to sparkling water specifically because it felt like the healthier upgrade from soda. Less sugar, no artificial color, marketed right next to the still water in the same aisle. For your valve, none of that matters. The bubbles behave the same way whether they're flavored, plain, sweetened, or not. Food number 4, mint. This is the one that catches almost everyone off guard, because mint has spent decades being marketed as the exact opposite of a problem. After-dinner mints, handed out at restaurants like a courtesy. Peppermint tea, sold specifically as a digestive aid. Chewing gum, recommended to settle the stomach after a heavy meal. The reality runs in the opposite direction. Peppermint and spearmint both contain compounds that relax smooth muscle, and the valve between your stomach and esophagus is made of exactly that. Instead of calming digestion, mint relaxes the one muscle whose entire job is staying shut when it isn't needed, so that after-dinner mint that feels cool and refreshing in the moment may be the reason the burning shows up 20 or 30 minutes later, once you've already stopped thinking about what you ate. Cut the mint tea and the after-dinner mints for 2 weeks, and pay attention to whether your evenings start to feel different. Chamomile or ginger tea make an easy swap. If mint is the one on this list you genuinely didn't see coming, comment it below. You won't be the only one. Mint earned this reputation because it was long believed to help digestion in general, and for some people, with some symptoms, it can. But good for digestion isn't the same as good for the valve, and that distinction is exactly what got lost along the way. Food number 3, citrus. Oranges, grapefruit, lemons, limes, and every juice made from any of them, including the ones marketed as a healthy way to start the morning. Citrus works 2 ways at once. First, it's naturally acidic, which directly irritates an esophagus that may already be inflamed from previous reflux, the same way lemon juice stings an open cut. Second, and less obviously, citrus appears to lower pressure inside the valve itself, making it easier for acid that's already present to escape upward. irritation on the way in, and a weaker seal holding everything back. Both effects from the same glass of orange juice at breakfast. Tomato-based foods, sauce, ketchup, salsa, work through the same acidic mechanism. None of this makes citrus unhealthy. It's still a real source of vitamin C and fiber. What it means is that a glass of grapefruit juice on an empty stomach can behave very differently at 55 than it did at 30. If mornings tend to be rough, try a lower acid fruit like banana or melon for a week and watch what changes. It's also worth noticing timing here. A glass of orange juice on an empty stomach in the morning hits the valve differently than the same juice at the end of a full meal, when there's already food in the stomach acting as a buffer. If mornings are consistently your worst window for symptoms, that first thing in the morning glass of juice is one of the easiest single changes to test. Food number 2, fried and fatty foods. Fried chicken, French fries, heavy cream-based sauces, fatty cuts of red meat cooked until the plate is left glistening. Fat slows everything down. It delays how quickly the stomach empties, which means food sits there longer, producing acid for longer, under more pressure, for hours after the meal is technically finished. At the same time, high-fat meals relax the valve directly, the same way alcohol and mint do. Two separate problems stack on top of each other. More acid, sitting around longer. Held in by a seal that's looser than it should be at the exact moment it needs to hold firm. This isn't a case against fat as a whole. Olive oil, avocado, and salmon behave differently in a reasonable portion than a fried, greasy dish does. It's the volume of fried, heavy fat in a single sitting that causes the problem. This is also why reflux after a heavy fried meal so often shows up later that night, once you're lying down and gravity has stopped doing you any favors. Baking, grilling, or roasting the same protein instead of frying it removes most of this effect. And food number 1, the one people defend the hardest when they hear it's a problem. Chocolate. Here's why it earns the top spot, and it genuinely isn't close. Chocolate contains theobromine, which relaxes the valve directly, on its own. It also contains caffeine, which relaxes that same muscle through a completely separate pathway. And on top of both, it's high in fat, which, as we just covered, slows digestion and stacks even more pressure onto a valve already working against 2 other forces at once. 3 separate mechanisms, all pulling against the same small muscle, all from a single dessert. There's also a common assumption that dark chocolate is the safer choice. For reflux specifically, it tends to be the opposite. Dark chocolate generally contains more of the compound that relaxes the valve than milk chocolate does, not less. This is the item people push back on hardest, and honestly, that reaction makes sense. Chocolate isn't just food. It's comfort. It's tradition. It's the reward at the end of a long day, or the thing shared with a grandchild on a Sunday afternoon. But chocolate may be doing more damage than any other single item on a typical plate, not because of one bad ingredient, but because it hits the same valve from 3 directions at once, every time it's eaten. Moving it earlier in the day, away from bedtime, or cutting the portion in half is often enough to feel a real difference without giving it up entirely. One odd pattern worth mentioning: most people worry far more about spicy food than they ever do about chocolate, even though the evidence points the other way. Spice can irritate an already inflamed esophagus, similar to citrus, but on its own, it doesn't relax the valve the way chocolate, mint, and heavy fat do. This is also why the worst flare-ups for a lot of people happen around holidays, not random Tuesdays. Valentine's Day, Easter, Halloween candy sitting in the kitchen for weeks. Chocolate shows up in concentrated amounts on exactly the days people are already eating heavier meals, which stacks the chocolate effect on top of everything else this list covers. How your valve actually recovers. Avoiding the 5 foods above takes pressure off the valve. Recovery is what happens next. The fastest fix, when burning has already started, is standing or sitting upright rather than reaching for the couch. Gravity is one of the few things still helping your valve hold acid down, and lying down removes that help completely. Chewing sugar-free gum for 15 to 20 minutes does something similar. It increases saliva, which is mildly alkaline and helps neutralize acid that's made it up into the esophagus. For nighttime symptoms, raising the head of the bed 6 to 8 inches, using risers or a wedge under the mattress, works far better than stacking pillows, which tend to bend you at the waist and can add pressure instead of removing it. For an occasional flare-up, a teaspoon of baking soda in a glass of water neutralizes acid quickly, the same basic ingredient behind several over-the-counter antacids. It's meant for occasional use, not a daily habit, and worth skipping if you're managing blood pressure or sodium intake. The bigger recovery isn't any single trick. It's giving that valve less to fight against, meal after meal, until it stops needing to recover from anything at all. Carrying less weight around your midsection matters too. It constantly pushes up on that same valve from below. If you're reaching for an antacid more than a few times a week despite cutting back on these foods, that's the moment to talk to a doctor, rather than just increasing the dose on your own. None of this replaces a doctor if symptoms are frequent, severe, or new, especially alongside difficulty swallowing or unintended weight loss. Comment how many of these 5 you're eating on a regular basis. Most people are surprised by their own number once they actually count. None of these foods act alone in real life. A soda with a fried, fatty dinner, followed by a mint on the way out. That's not 5 separate small risks. It's the same valve pushed from 4 directions in under an hour, usually the point where reflux stops being occasional and starts becoming nightly. 3 habits help regardless of what's on the plate. Smaller meals, finishing dinner at least 3 hours before lying down, and sleeping on your left side. None of this means giving up chocolate, citrus, mint, or a cold drink forever. It means understanding that after 50, your valve has less margin for error than it used to. So if reflux is showing up more than twice a week or waking you up at night, that's worth bringing to a doctor rather than managing quietly with another antacid. Know the valve, know what works against it, and you'll spend a lot less time lying awake wondering why the burning keeps coming back. If this helped you connect symptoms you've been living with to a cause you hadn't considered, there's more like it coming. Subscribe so the next one doesn't pass you by. Why this hits harder after 50. Before the list, it helps to understand why this shows up now, when it may not have been a problem in your 30s or 40s. That valve is a ring of smooth muscle, and like every other muscle in your body, it loses tone with age. The same process that gradually weakens grip strength is happening to that valve too. It just doesn't get noticed until it starts leaking acid instead of aching after a workout. Slower stomach emptying and extra weight around the midsection, both more common after 50, add constant pressure on top of that. None of that makes reflux inevitable. It means the valve has less margin for error than it did 20 years ago, so foods that caused mild, occasional discomfort at 30 can cause nightly burning at 55, even if nothing else in your diet has changed.